In any crime, we look at who has a motive. And clearly, the oligarchs that run the New World Order world government system have all the motives, everything to gain. They've used the attacks to create a firestorm, an hysterical fear throughout the Western world. In fact, all over the entire globe. And their answer is more and more police state in nations domestically. The excuse governments need to crack down on their populations and their freedoms. And we're going to look at some more of the evidence of that. It's voluminous, to say the least, but we're going to cover some of it. If we tried to cover it all, this film would be several hundred hours long, literally. We'll also look at some of the other motives they had. It's not just about a domestic crackdown. It's about being able to militarily attack any nation that doesn't go along with the globalists, as well as the oil supply, the Central Asian oil supply. Afghanistan was the only nation holding out to allow a pipeline to go through their nation and down to the Arabian Sea. You see, the second biggest oil reserves in the world are in Afghanistan. But not just oil and not just pipelines. Don't forget that over half of world poppy production, that is opium production, that is the derivative of heroin, or that you get heroin from, is produced in Afghanistan. So we have oil, we have poppies that produce heroin. It's also a key smuggling route, and it's a pretext, an excuse to invade any nation that gets in between the New World Order gang and their global government. But right now, let's just look at some more of the domestic reasons here in the United States that the New World Order gang would be behind this. Then we'll talk about some of the other smoking gun evidence and those that are going public, pointing the finger at the New World Order gang. Top CIA official warns next terror attack unavoidable, creating fear. And we see these stories every day. Deputy CIA Director James Pavitt told a packed house of academics at a conference in April that Americans have too many liberties and that they can't protect us because we have these liberties, and that we would just give up our liberties, they could then give us security. Again, if you give up liberty, you get tyranny, ladies and gentlemen. You never get security. But that doesn't stop the Deputy CIA Director, as well as every other federal law enforcement or security official out there, to tell us that we need to give up our liberty for security. And Governor Ridge, the head of the Office of Homeland Security, has told Congress and the American people that he won't testify because he's not under the Freedom of Information Act, that he has a completely separate and secret administration that's totally unaccountable to anyone but the president. Sounds like the SS of Nazi Germany. And he's telling us that he needs more authority if he's going to be able to protect us. Again, give me all your liberties, give me total power, or those bad terrorists are going to get you. Who's holding a gun to the American people's head? And then he tells us, hey, my power is going to be permanent. I need more power forever, because it's not a 10-year war or a 20-year war. It's a 100-year war. And now they're saying a war that will last indefinitely, maybe generation after generation after generation. Here it is out of the Washington Post. Ridge says terrorism is permanent, that it is a permanent atmosphere, and that it's going to get worse. Oh yeah, if you get more power and control, we can certainly imagine it's going to get worse. But it's not just government officials in the Republican and Democratic Party. It's also people like Warren Buffett, the billionaire insurance tycoon. He's predicting a thermonuclear attack or attacks. In fact, he's saying it's virtually a certainty. And again, this from the Associated Press, it's because we have too many liberties. We're just going to have more nuclear attacks and or further attacks, nuclear attacks. We're going to have nuclear attacks, and they're going to have to take all of our liberties away to keep us safe. But don't worry, there's a few precautions that we can carry out here. If we allow FEMA, which they're now doing through the Office of Homeland Security, to federalize Neighborhood Watch, everything is going to be all right. In fact, this AP article is out of New Jersey, and they've gotten a lesson in terror. And what did the feds teach them? Well, they told them on a recent evening about 24 residents gathered on recliners to learn to watch women with baby strollers or kindly-looking priest. They might not be so maternal after all. They might not be so religious after all. Watch everyone. Trust no one but the men from the federal government wearing the black uniforms and ski masks. It literally says it, ladies and gentlemen, out of the Twilight Zone. And don't worry, the new Office of Homeland Security will provide us with military protection. New command will protect the United States. We already covered that earlier in the film. 350,000+ U.S. troops to patrol the United States. And it's not just U.S. troops that are going to be patrolling the U.S. No, Mexican defense minister to discuss possible joint North American military force. Now, they already had it set up and planned and were training Mexican, Canadian, and Czechoslovakian officers in '99 when we first learned of it. In fact, they mention it here in the article. The plan apparently is based on a U.S. Army War College report in '99 that suggested a North American peacekeeping force that would be headquartered in the United States but include command posts that would rotate between Mexico and Canada. And when you read that '99 Army War College report, they call for Mexican and Canadian troops to, quote, patrol America and deal with American terrorists and for peacekeeping. And the head of UN peacekeeping, General McKenzie, just days after September 11th, on Nightline, called for United Nations troops to patrol the United States. And Donald Rumsfeld called for it in early April of 2002. He met with the Norwegian defense minister and happily announced, was also reported in the New York Daily News, his press conference, that they were going to put 56 Norwegian F-16 jet fighters in America's skies to, quote, shoot down American aircraft if they were hijacked. So, again, we're being conditioned. Foreign troops are going to protect us. Now you see why the globalists pulled off September 11th. Rumsfeld, Norwegian pilots needed to protect U.S. military run down by Clinton. Oh, now conservatives were going to get those evil liberals with foreign troops when it was Bill Clinton's dream to bring foreign troops in here. See how they manipulate you with this system. And also, starting on May 10th, 2002, they had a nonstop media blitz throughout the weekend, starting on Friday, with families, Alzheimer's patients, children, you name it, being implanted with implantable satellite tracking chips. And there are reasons: medical, anti-terrorism, that way we can be trusted people, prisoners. There's now contracts with the Bureau of Prisons out in California to implant parolees. Everybody needs a chip, so we'll all be safer. First humans have now received their microchips. Family gets computer chips implanted for medical information. And again, you read on, it's for anti-terror reasons. It's for everything you can imagine. And yes, emergency drill held at school. They're having thousands of these around the country. Men in black uniforms are in camouflage, dragging children out at gunpoint. The government's got to keep us safe, and they've got to take our liberties away to do it. And more reports coming out about how torture's good and how the U.S. Army has 30 ways to get al-Qaeda prisoners to talk. Maybe. But remember, at the same time, they've flown the Taliban and al-Qaeda leaders out and have been protecting them. They had bin Laden and his chieftains in their sights, the Air Force did, 10 separate times, and were ready to kill him with their Predator drones. But the CIA said no over and over again and then helped airlift them out of the country. But that's okay. The Army can get trained on how to torture prisoners. Again, the same reports over and over again. And don't forget that the government planned all of this back in 1962 to hijack its own aircraft, to remote control them into buildings, to bomb Washington, D.C., to attack the Marines at Guantanamo Bay. The U.S. government was going to attack itself to blame it on enemies as a, quote, pretext for an invasion. The Northwoods document, the same system over and over and over again. Problem, reaction, solution. And they were getting the feds prepared for this back in 1999. Don't forget that in 93, the feds cooked the bomb and trained the drivers at the first World Trade Center attack and let that take place Here's the 1999 FEMA training manual for police and EMS and firefighters, and there you have the World Trade Center complex in the crosshairs. Again, talk about throwing it in your face. They do it over and over again. It's like Governor Keating's brother writing that book, The Final Jihad, 2-3 years before the Oklahoma City tragedy, where Tom McVeigh bombs the federal building. They love to throw it in your face. I guess it's part of the bragging rights or something. The list goes on and on. That is just some of the evidence of why the globalists would want to engage in this. Foreign troops, microchips, U.S. Army patrolling the streets, more federal funding and control, secrecy, total secrecy over federal agencies, sicking the CIA on the American people. Now let's look at some of the other reasons they pulled off September 11th that aren't domestic. It's about oil, ladies and gentlemen. The second biggest oil reserves, not just opium reserves, reside in Afghanistan. And all the other areas of the pipeline had been completed, other than the pipeline, the final spigot of the pipeline that ran through Afghanistan and then through Pakistan out to the Arabian Sea. The Taliban had been big buddies of the CIA. They'd been put into power by the CIA, again, part of the public record, but they'd suddenly started refusing to go along and play ball. That's when Osama bin Laden, the CIA double asset, was activated to order his terrorists to attack the U.S., hence creating a pretext for war. Then all the feds had to do was open the door and make sure the attack wasn't hindered by any good federal assets in Defense Intelligence or FBI, and they'd get their police state and their global takeover they needed. By the way, now Unocal is finishing that pipeline now that a puppet government's been put into power in Afghanistan. In fact, here is the congressional testimony by the Vice President of International Relations at Unocal, the big Dick Cheney oil company, in February 12, 1998, when the Taliban first turned on them, saying, hey, we got to get this pipeline through. You've got to pressure the Afghan government. This is the congressional testimony, the congressional record with Unocal saying they had a problem back in 1998. Another smoking gun. It's about oil. It's about heroin. It's about global tyranny, ladies and gentlemen. Here's another New York Times story. Oil diplomacy muddled U.S. pursuit of bin Laden. Again, ladies and gentlemen, they couldn't stop bin Laden before September 11th because he's in with the Saudis. Now let's look at insider trading, and a particularly risky type of insider trading. We're talking about put options or short selling. Now, in the days after September 11th, firms pointed out that record put options had been placed on the airline industry, but not on the airline industry as a whole. Oh, no, it was even more suspicious. Record, 3 times any previously recorded put options, not just on the airline industry, but specifically on United and American. We all heard we'd be able to find out who was behind September 11th. And then suddenly the story left our media almost entirely. That's because, ladies and gentlemen, on just cursory inspection, it turned out that it was Buzzy Krongard, now executive director of the CIA, who had been behind the put options. His company had placed almost all of the put options, and 3 other high-level CIA agents' names have been listed in mainstream media accounts. This is out of the London Independent, Buzzy Krongard. And then, of course, we haven't mentioned defense spending, record defense spending surrounding September 11th. And guess who owns the major firm making the profits off the defense spending? The principals in the Carlyle Group, getting 1/2 of defense spending budget through their brokerage house. That's right, the same players again, the bin Laden family and the Bush family. Known principals in the Carlyle Group. They're making money off oil, money off opium, money off the huge defense budget, and a pretext to invade any country that gets in their way, and a domestic crackdown here in the United States. The Carlyle Group, the Wall Street Journal, and other publications have reported, is the principal, ladies and gentlemen, principal contractor in all of the new defense budget contracts. And they've always been in the top 5 of defense brokers. And the principal owners, Osama bin Laden's family and the Bush crime family dynasty. The same story over and over again. They're in oil, they're in opium, they're in weapons, they're in Wackenhut and prisons. Police state. They only stand to profit and to get more power out of it. So, arms buildup in richest firm, staffed by big guns, LA Times, the Carlyle Group, ladies and gentlemen. And now we have all the suppressed details of insider trading with Buzzy Krongard and the CIA coming out in more and more publications. Does this not anger you, the American people? So let's go over it again. Oil, heroin, weapons sales, record defense budget, record federal budget, $2 trillion for 2003. So oil, heroin, weapons, a military excuse to invade any nation that gets on their way, and a domestic police state crackdown. The globalists profit from all of these industries which they own and control, whether it's prisons or pipelines, or heroin or police state. They stand to gain from all of it. Now let's look at some of the good news. More and more FBI agents have gone public, like Special FBI Agent Robert Wright out of Phoenix, Arizona. He was told by the Bush administration to keep his mouth shut and to not stop several of the hijackers that were trying to fly aircraft in the Phoenix area. Same story we got out of Illinois, same story out of Florida, same story out of Minnesota. But again, one more FBI agent that's gone public that he wasn't allowed to stop Al-Qaeda. We also have a problem. Now we're seeing how guilty the globalists are. Bush threatened the Congress not to have multiple investigations in 7 different committees, so they scaled it down to 1 committee. Well, now the committees hit a bunch of different obstacles. CIA agents that were testifying have been caught lying under oath. They failed polygraph tests. They're absconding. Governor Ridge, the new Gauleiter, Homeland Security Chief, is refusing to testify. Again, the list goes on and on. They are obstructing big time with their hands in the cookie jars. Now Senator Graham has had to go public. This is out of the St. Petersburg Times in Florida, saying they're covering up what really happened in September 11th. Another headline, 911 inquiry delayed as staff chief is ousted in CIA dispute. This is out of the big Seattle Daily newspaper. I've got hundreds of these articles, hundreds of eyewitnesses. I've interviewed many of them myself. It's just mind-blowing. The government did this, folks, and they're coming after your freedoms. Here's another one, FBI whistleblower on 911 cover-up. Another FBI agent going public. Judicial Watch was going to have a press conference, and I talked to them. They got threatened by the White House and canceled it. They were being threatened with national security violations as spies if they exposed government prior knowledge and involvement. Unbelievable. To their credit, Judicial Watch is now suing the federal government because of the Carlyle Group. The federal government, the Bushes, are refusing to release any documents concerning the Carlyle Group and the massive defense budget and oil spending programs that they're involved in that all profit from September 11th. So the heat is definitely on these shady characters. Here's another one from September 15th out of WorldNet Daily. U.S. sent Afghanistan $125 million. Other reports say $134 to $35 million. Washington is largest donor for second straight year. So right before September 11th, they were sending record foreign aid for Afghanistan to the tune of $125+ million. And talk about prior knowledge, preparing the war. Another article, this out of the Times of India. This story came out June 26, months before September 11th. India and anti-Taliban military plan. U.S. troops, special forces, confirmed to be massing in Tajikistan and Uzbekistan for an invasion of Afghanistan. Again, this is a story from June, and there's hundreds of these articles from all over the world that our troops were massing there. What did they know that the people in the towers and the Pentagon didn't know? Why didn't they get warned? Because the globalists stand to gain from all of this. Here's another mainstream French report. French news agency, a most highly respected, bin Laden treated for kidney disorder in Dubai. Hospital officials said on the record he was there with the CIA section chief in July planning the September 11th attacks. What more do you need, folks? Now, again, there are congressional investigations. A lot of people are starting to talk about this now, and that is the good news. So now you know, September 11th was about oil. It was about being able to attack any nation that got in the way of world government and the New World Order's aims. It was about controlling the opium supply. It was about record defense budgets, which the Carlyle Group, owned by the Bushes and the bin Ladens, stood to gain from. It was about controlling the opium supply. It was about a domestic police state crackdown. Again, it was about world government and a massive movement towards tyranny. This was their pretext. But it's not just FBI agents and senators that are going public about the cover-up. One of the most vocal critics of this administration, this would-be dictatorship, is Congresswoman Cynthia McKinney. She simply called for an investigation and said, is the Bush administration profiting from September 11th, which they clearly are in dozens of different ways. For this, she was attacked viciously in the news. And all she requested was an investigation of government prior knowledge and involvement. We saw the headlines. Politician, Bush knew in advance of 9/11. The Washington Post, Democrat implies September 11th administration plot. After 4 or 5 days of nonstop demonization, top story in the news, her hometown paper, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, ran a poll. And in the poll, 52%, and there were tens of thousands of respondents that took the poll, a whopping 52%, believed that there should be an investigation of government prior knowledge and involvement. So the media pulled the poll, intensified their demonization campaign. 3 or 4 days later, they had another poll. When they pulled the poll that time, it hit 51.4% believe there should be an investigation of government prior knowledge and involvement. And if you go to the Congresswoman's website, it's pretty mild stuff. All she points out is the Carlyle Group connection, the oil pipeline, bin Laden, the CIA hospital, the American hospital in Dubai, months before September 11th with the CIA. Simple questions, though earth-shattering questions, that need to be answered by this administration. But the tea leaves, the writing is on the wall. The globalists know that more and more people are waking up to their control freak paradigm. And we're trying to save lives here. If we don't expose this illegitimate national security dictatorship for what they've done, they're going to pull off more and more attacks in the months and years to come. They've told us it's going to happen. Give up our liberty or the bad men are going to get us. They have a gun to our head, and there's nothing these control freaks won't do. They will lower themselves to any level if it gives them total power and control and access to the life extension technologies they've been suppressing. So again, it's up to you. Investigate it. Check it out for yourself. Whether it's foreign troops or open borders or this illegitimate government funding terrorists or profiting in oil and drugs and war and the rest of it from this garbage, all of humanity is under attack by this tiny cabal that is the New World Order. God bless you all. I'm Alex Jones, signing off from 911, The Road to Tyranny.